Yeah, it's a very critical question. Thank you, Julie. It's more than a question of an opportunity for green and renewable. It has to do with our ability as a global economy to recover. Yesterday, Shell Oil said that they didn't think oil was going to come back. That's a significant concession. It's a combination, as we know, and my heart bleeds for people who believe the sector is going to come back, because it's not. They've got, number one, we had Russia and Saudi Arabia colluding to make sure the price of oil dropped. Their goal there was to make unconventional oil, such as oil sands bitumen, but their target was more particularly back in shale, which has occupied so much of the U.S. market and led to the U.S. being far more energy secure and energy independent than they used to be. So Russia and Saudi Arabia were colluding to make the price drop to the bottom of the barrel, no pun intended. And then on top of that, unexpected, came a pandemic, which drove down demand for oil to unprecedented low levels, to where now the biggest problem in the oil sector is to find a place to store the oil for which there is no market. Even oil industry analysts looking at this are saying it's not going to come right back by any means. It will take years if it does come back. And in the meantime, the fierce competition is from renewable energy. And this is talking about the technology, the cost, the price point. So the recent review by the International Energy Agency found that every single energy source on the planet was taking a beating except renewable energy, which this year is increasing. In 2020, the renewable energy is going up by 5%. And by the end of this year, the International Energy Agency predicts that renewables will occupy a full 30% of generated electricity. So it's a big shift. At the same time, and I'm sorry, it's a longish answer, the global economy we are at a real risk of a very lengthy depression. We have to avoid that. That means we can't take the advice of people who say, for instance, you've spent enough money now, we're in debt, time to pay it back. We can't turn off the faucet, in other words. The only game in town for holding society together, domestically and globally, is government spending. The private sector can't immediately pick up the slack after pandemic, and the oil sector isn't automatically going to, it's going to be years if it comes back, if at all. So it's very important that governments have incentives, put money into the economy, and do it in a way that builds on success, which is to say energy efficiency and renewables. And I'll stop there just to say there was a report that came out, I think 2 days ago, out of Oxford University. The two lead authors were Nobel Prize-winning economist Joseph Stiglitz and the former Chancellor of the Exchequer from the UK, Sir Nicholas Stern. They interviewed more than 200 central banks around the world and leading finance experts. And the advice is, if we want to get out of this pandemic with a healthy global economy, don't put money in fossil fuels at all to try to bail them out. It won't work. Put money into renewables and energy efficiency and a low carbon economy, because that's the only money that's going to actually be able to create a lot of jobs quickly and get the economy going again.
So basically you're saying oil is dead.
Oil is dead. And for people in the sector, it's very important that there be just transition funds, that there be strategies that go to every worker, every community. We've gone through this before, but on a smaller scale. When the government of Quebec decided asbestos is over. Now, that wasn't because they couldn't get price and they didn't have supply and they didn't have demand. It was because they finally faced the fact that it was killing people all around the world. We have, made government decisions. We've had bad management of resources that led to collapse. So 30,000 people lost work overnight in the early 90s when the cod stocks collapsed. And that was a predictable disaster, one that was ignored at the time by those who had the power to change things and keep the cod stocks going. But we do know, we've learned from bad examples of what you don't do to help communities when their resources have, through no fault of their own, come to an end. And diversifying the Alberta economy is enormously important. Groups like Iron and Earth, it's former oil sands workers who are now in renewable energy, are seeing the opportunities, and they're real life opportunities. There's no question but that the Alberta economy has to diversify, and the Canadian economy. We have a lot of our economy that's betting on exports of oil and exports of cars. And there's another whole wave about to hit us, not to be too depressing, but artificial intelligence is about to hit us, and driverless cars. And we have to be way ahead of the curve on this stuff. And the pandemic, in a very real way, as horrific as this is, at many, many levels, and primarily in the loss of human life, it gives us an opportunity to stop and think, how do we get this economy back up on its feet? It's not too early to be thinking about a conference on the scale of the post-war Bretton Woods conference. We need smart people globally to get together and say, are the tools we've been using since the end of the Second World War the right tools going forward? How do we maintain full employment, protect our people, get the economy going again in a context in which, this is another whole concern, the price of goods and the price of energy is going to continue to drop through things like AI, through things like the fact that solar energy and wind energy, once you install renewable energy, the marginal cost of energy is zero. So that a zero price world is not something we've ever dealt with before. So we really need to stop and think, how do we, as a country and as a society of nations, and I think starting very soon, start talking about, do the tools we have now and the tools we've used since the Second World War still work? And I really do think it's time for something like a Bretton Woods 2.
But when I said oil is dead, I was summarizing what you said. That wasn't my second question.
Oh, sorry.
Can